This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support.
Hybrid Cloud Show, episode 48. I'm Aaron.
I'm Gary.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Shane.
Welcome to the show about public cloud, private cloud, and everything in between. Our views here are ours and not those of our employers. So, Shane, you were telling us before the show that you've got a problem around backups. Do you want to lead us in?
I'm running Kubernetes apps on a bunch of old laptops. All the data lives in a NAS, which I'm connecting to over persistent volumes, and I'm worried about backups.
And this is the homelab that is a lot less janky than it used to be.
Yes. Let's go with yes. It's a proper NAS, and it has some redundancy in it.
Are they real disks or USB disks?
They're real disks now. It's not just a bunch of USB drives plugged into a laptop with a hope and a prayer.
Okay, so we've got a good starting point.
I assume, based on our last conversations, that you're still running ZFS on this NAS?
Yes, I am running ZFS. I have things broken down by data sets to some extent. So I'm trying to partition the data in a scalable way.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how your Kubernetes cluster is using these things as persistent volumes?
So basically, I use a lot of Helm charts, and many of those Helm charts let you point to persistent volumes. So how it works is I have a NFS subdir Helm chart that lets me vend volumes that my applications will use in Kubernetes. So I'll have, okay, this is a Nextcloud instance and it's going to use this persistent volume. The persistent volume will refer to an endpoint on my NAS. So it basically just kind of seamlessly mounts that data and uses it.
And behind the scenes, that's an NFS mount of your ZFS dataset or something.
That's it. Exactly that.
Okay, so then what backup options do you have for your NAS? Do you have another NAS? Are you looking to go to a cloud service or some other third party, or are you looking to just put these onto external drives?
Well, what I've got is external drives. So I have 2 USB drives, because I had some lying around, that are plugged into the NAS. And then I have some ZFS snapshots of the important data sets already streaming and backing up. So that's all I've got, though, which is why I'm nervous.
So what do you feel you're missing in this scenario? So you've got the data, it's on the NAS, it's snapshotted, it is mirrored to a couple of external drives on a regular basis. What's giving you the discomfort?
The first thing, I guess, is redundancy, in that obviously if there's a fire in my house or I'm robbed, I will lose all my data and all my backups.
What do you mean you're not going to grab one of those external hard drives before your kids? Come on now.
Which kid?
Nobody told my wife.
Pick a favorite. Okay.
My wife is not listening to this. It's all good. So no, probably wouldn't grab the USB drives. Maybe. Really, actually, maybe. I'm thinking about this. But no, let's pretend I'm not going to grab them, or there's a fire and I'm on holidays or something, you know.
Right. So it's really offsite backups that you're considering as a problem here.
Yeah, and it's actually a recent to me anyway, Linux After Dark, where I heard people talking about like ZFS backups and I think it was storage boxes, Hetzner storage boxes I was looking into. Haven't bought anything or made a commitment to anything, but it sort of triggered me being like, I need to worry about this a bit more.
So I may have mentioned, but for a long time I have had a Raspberry Pi sitting in a friend's basement. It sits there with an attached USB disk, and then that is periodically connecting back over to my server through SSH over Nebula, and is then doing a syncoid of those data sets that I want to from there. And then you've just got that can be scrubbed and all the rest of it on the Raspberry Pi on a regular basis.
Not to fully retrace all the steps in Linux After Dark, but there definitely is some hesitancy to put storage in other people's houses. Probably the people who I could rely on live quite far from me, and I don't feel like if I needed to quickly get access to that data, I don't feel that comfortable with that solution, being honest. Certainly an option, but it's a tricky one.
I think finding someone you can trust who wants to have a server running 24/7 in their house with drives spinning up and down is a tricky thing, unless you just tell them it's their router, which is definitely not something I'd do.
That's a good idea.
He's done that before.
So that really puts you in the realm of cloud services then, right? You don't have a trusted friend where you could store something.
I have no friends, Gary.
Well, I didn't like to assume. So really that leaves you with cloud services. And I think there are a few options there. There's some kind of managed service like a heads and a storage box. There is going and renting a VPS or a bare metal server from somewhere. Or there's using something like Backblaze or S3 or one of the cheaper alternatives to S3, let's face it, to back that data up to. And I suppose it depends on really what you're looking for and how big the data is as to what you choose.
If you're running TrueNAS, then there's all these cloud sync built into the GUI that you can just easily configure. Things like Backblaze or S3, like Gary said, are super easy to set up. And if you're running on something that doesn't have a GUI, then tools like Restic or AutoRestic are great wrappers and easily configurable to do the same thing.
Yeah, my understanding is TrueNAS is just setting that stuff up for you behind the scenes for the most part.
Correct.
One of the things I've looked at in case my friend stops wanting to have a box in his house is zfs.rent, which I think Jim's mentioned a couple of times. But the model there, as I understand it, is you get a VM, but you send them a hard drive and they will put that attached to your VM. But it means that you can buy a 20 terabyte hard drive or whatever and then get it shipped to them. And then you've got that much storage attached to your VM.
That's quite cool. Is that expensive? I mean, you're not paying per terabyte, I guess, because it's arbitrary what the disk is.
Yeah, so it's the fixed cost rather than a variable cost to use however much is on your hard drive. Obviously, then it's not resilient in the sense that if you want to have redundancy, you would have to ship them 2 or multiple drives, and you pay more for that. So it's what use case you have. But in terms of having a large disk sitting there, then that's something I've looked at before. But then you've got your data sitting in a cloud provider as opposed to a box with your friend. Now, I've got encrypted data sets for all of my actual data, and I don't have the key on that Raspberry Pi sitting at his house. So that's relatively secure. One of the downsides is that ZFS currently on Linux, as far as I understand it, doesn't yet have the feature that lets you do a ZFS allow only for raw sends. And what that means is that the SSH user that I have from my Raspberry Pi coming back to my server has rights that it could, in theory, if it were compromised, send my unencrypted data to whoever's compromised that server. So if that goes away, and I believe they are working on it, if I could limit that SSH user to just sending encrypted raw streams, then I would be more inclined to use something like ZFS Rent and have the encrypted data going to them.
I suppose the other problem with all of these providers is geographically where they're available, right? ZFS Rent is only in Canada. They have a single data center. So it's going to be very expensive for you in Europe to ship that disk to them. And there's going to be a very long lead time to get that disk back from them, should you want to restore more than a couple of terabytes of data that might be reasonable for you to pull over a normal internet connection.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting option probably down the line. I would say for now, I'd probably be looking at like some sort of cloud storage provider with some sort of redundancy that would be better than what I would do. And something maybe that I could encrypt locally so I don't need to trust them to store my data. So I've got everything encrypted by default.
For a long time, I contributed to a project called Duplicity, which is a basic sort of Python wrapper around a mix of a incremental backup utility and then a bunch of different backends that hit all of the different clouds, which then let you easily upload what you've got as a Delta or whatever onto those clouds. And it works really well. It's what I still use if I need something that's non-ZFS based. But it isn't free snapshots because only something like ZFS can give you free snapshots. And so you end up in that position where you either have very long incremental chains Or you end up in a situation where you have to do a big backup every however many to make sure that you're not too far away from your last proper backup. There are some interesting other technologies I remember looking into at the time, like DAR as a replacement for tar. And the project around DAR has some concepts of like reverse incrementals and things where you can end up in a position where you've got a good latest and then everything previous is the incremental backwards, as I understand it. So there are a lot of technologies like that you can use. It's just finding one that kind of fits exactly what you want in terms of how reliable your latest backup is, how many incrementals you're going to be taking, and sort of the frequency of that you need. That's why it gets more complicated than a ZFS backup, where a snapshot's effectively free.
Yeah, I've run duplicity before, actually, and I think it was managing the rules around the number of incrementals and when to do a full backup and the storage implications of all that made it kind of tricky to manage and understand the state of things a lot of the time.
That's right. Dupli is a nice command line front end to duplicity if you ever have to use that again, which uses things like config files to manage it. And there's a Deja dupe front end that you can use in your Ubuntu desktop or whatever.
There's also Duplicati, which is a mono web UI on top of Duplicity, which is pretty good as well.
This episode is sponsored by Antigravity. Go to hybridcloudshow.com/A1drone. The Antigravity A1 breaks new ground as the first drone to deliver true all-in-one 8K 360-degree video capture in a single device. It's engineered to be approachable for beginners while still delivering professional-style performance, capturing stunning 8K spherical footage using the same imaging technology trusted in Insta360 cameras. By filming in every direction at the same time, it captures every angle in one pass, giving you complete flexibility in post-production. You can choose your framing, add smooth cinematic camera motion, and shape the final video to match your creative vision. Advanced 360-degree stitching technology ensures that the drone is cleanly removed from the finished footage. The A1 also features vision goggles that stream a live 360-degree view directly from the drone. Simply move your head to look around and experience the scene from any angle in real time. OmniLink transmission delivers a consistently smooth, stable feed with minimal latency. SkyPath flight controls let you design and manage precise flight paths with ease. You can plan, store, and automate routes so the drone flies on its own, freeing you to focus on composition, scenery, or directing the shot. The Antigravity A1 is a real game changer. You get full immersive flight with the goggles, intuitive controls, and endless creative freedom in editing. If you're thinking about buying a drone, make it this one. Check out the link in the show notes to learn more.
There is another concern I have around these backups, which I'm worried ZFS snapshots or just capturing the raw data that's on the NAS won't cover. That would be things like Postgres databases. Like if I take a raw disk snapshot of that, what's in memory? It's not application aware. And so I'm a little bit worried about, okay, let's say Postgres is writing to a PVC and I snapshot ZFS without coordinating that DB. What issues might I run into? I'm a little, and we're hitting the limits of my knowledge here, but like, should I be worried about that? Is that kind of a non-issue? It's that like snapshotting live running systems, not coordinating them, and what the costs of that are. And if there's ways in Kubernetes to like, I don't know, there's things you can sidecar load to like run and do like app aware backups rather than just raw disk snapshots.
Yeah, this is a real thing. And some of the backup products, I'm stretching my knowledge now, but it might have been something like Bacula. There's a few of those things where they do specifically have plugins for different databases that will flush the database before you do the backup of it for the sort of reasons that you're talking about.
Shane, I got a question for you. When you do your Postgres backups, are you using any kind of operator for these Postgres databases, or are you just raw dogging some Bitnami Postgres image?
I am raw dogging some Helm chart that's got Postgres on it.
All right. So first step is to get off of that and get on to one of the big ones. Cloud Native is always very big. Cloud Native Postgres and Zalando are the ones I usually hear recommended. And the reason I recommend this to you is because they have their own backup mechanisms, if you will, using Postgres native technologies like write-ahead logs, wall E and wall G, to help kind of do this for you. And then they can back up to either drives or S3 or wherever else you want to put them. So that might be a good way to get started and making sure that you have, like you said, application aware backups.
That's a really good suggestion. And I've happily just realized I am using the CNPG Postgres instance. So might be able to just turn something on. But that would kind of solve one of my other requirements or hopes, which was that I could manage this through GitOps still. So effectively, I could make the updates or manage this centrally along with the Helm charts and all the other configuration I've got for the whole homelab.
Yeah, the backup configuration should just be a config map. So yeah, you can still manage that through GitOps, no problem.
So if you were configuring that, where do you send those backups? I guess wherever you like, really.
Wherever you want. I'm personally backing up to an S3 bucket that is hosted on my NAS, and then my NAS takes that data and ships it off to somewhere else for backups.
Is there anything else I should worry about? Like databases was a big one, but like anything else in memory you do special kind of app-aware backups of?
No, to be honest with you, a lot of applications, especially things like databases, are usually pretty resilient to not having the full context of the memory also being snapshotted along with the data that's been written to disk. And things like flush syncs are usually pretty quick, enough to where like I'm not worried that I'm going to miss some data and I'm going to come back and it's going to be corrupted. The only caveat being SQLite over NFS. I have been bitten by that so many times. I'm here to warn you. Learn from my mistakes, Shane. If you have something that is being powered by SQLite database, first of all, stop it. Put it onto a Postgres server or MariaDB or whatever, and then configure it to use that and then back up that database. That's going to be a much more resilient setup for you that won't be prone to corruption.
But just a file. It's great. What are you talking about? What issue? I'm very curious what issues you're seeing.
Oh, I've come back where like the power went out or a snapshot was done. I tried to restore a previous snapshot and the SQLite file is just corrupted.
Right.
Because they can get corrupted for any number of reasons, especially like latency over a network. That's a common occurrence.
Have any of you used Valero? It's something I've come across a couple of times in terms of backing up Kubernetes, but it's not something I've personally used.
Yeah, I used it relatively extensively in a previous life. We had quite a large OpenShift cluster. The PVCs were on AWS EBS volumes, and we used Valero to back those up rather than relying on the AWS native tooling. So we had a Valero container running per cluster, which grabbed anything in a PVC with a certain tag and pushed that to S3.
I love it. And sometimes if you're using things like Pure Storage or Longhorn, things that are backing your PVCs that also have native backup capabilities, you can also configure that to back up to like an S3 bucket. But if you don't, you're doing something like where Shane's doing, where it's just onto a disk or onto a raw file system, then yeah, Valero would be a great choice. And they have a decent free tier.
So I notice a lot of the strategy you're talking about is like backup, app-aware backups locally, and then shift those to a cloud or somewhere else later on, rather than going directly from your Kubernetes cluster to the cloud.
3, 2, 1. It's 3 copies of my data across 2 different mediums and one's offsite.
Yeah, makes sense.
I mean, you already have a second copy in ZFS format anyway, right? So it's your third offsite in a different format that you're looking for here.
S3.
Yeah, maybe I'll go with boring S3.
Boring is great. Boring is the best.
What quantity of data are you talking about?
The disks go up to, I can't remember now, 12 terabytes, I think. So it's not like humongous amounts of data, but I guess it could get expensive in S3.
That's huge. That's huge. The max that I send, I think, over is 1 terabyte. And that's like all of my photos and things that can't be replaced and important documents and stuff.
There's tiers to this. I may like not do a whole 3-2-1 backup for all 12 terabytes. So I could probably whittle that down to like a terabyte or 2 maybe of data.
Yeah, for me, I would consider this a last resort because I would have to pay egress fees or it would take forever to pull it down.
Yeah.
In my scenario, I'm doing ZFS sends offsite, which would be the first one I would grab because that's a house that's a few miles away from mine. And then I'm doing the sends to OVH, which is just absolutely critical data, photos, that kind of thing. And that box has got a 300 meg upload bandwidth, I think. So the reality is that if I'm pulling down any more than 100 gig from there, it's going to take some time. So that's an absolute last resort.
Yeah, it's going to be expensive if you get anywhere near your 12 terabytes. And it's a little worrying in a way if you don't have anything offsite that is beyond your kind of critical data. So I've thought about having an emergency set, for example, I don't know, stick a lower resolution or just the JPEG versions of my photos instead of all my RAWs and all the rest of it in a different location, maybe on, I don't know, I've got a Blu-ray writer that can do those apparently 1,000-year M discs or whatever. So I thought about doing just my photos onto that, for example. But if that happened, that would require my on-site additional drives to have failed and my off-site of everything to have failed at my friend's house, and I couldn't go and pick that up or whatever, then I'm really down into my last resort. But, it's about thinking through what your failure states are. What is it that's going to make you need that backup? If the thing that you're worried about is somebody burning your house down or coming and taking all of the disks that are in your house, then you could conceivably lose all of them in one go much more easily if you've only got your emergency set outside of what's sitting in your house.
I know that some services like Backblaze will have a feature where if you're trying to do a massive restore of a lot of data, they'll send you a drive. It's obviously expensive, but it beats waiting 3 days over a slow internet speed for you to maybe get a couple files.
That's a nice option as well, actually. I kind of quite like the idea of that as a last resort, to just pay it out and have a disk I can deal with.
Well, back in the old days when I used to go into the office a lot more, I used to just have a hard drive sitting in my office desk drawer, which I would bring home, and then I would do another sync of it effectively and then take it back to the office. And I even had 2 of them for a while when I was feeling particularly paranoid, and I rotated them. So one of them was coming home with me this week, and then the next one was in the drawer the next week. It's not a terrible option if there's somewhere that you go on a regular basis that you can stick a hard drive in a drawer, and then you can have your full ZFS data sets because it's relatively cheap at that point to just have a hard drive that you plug in and do your ZFS send effectively of all of your data sets.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout because, I know it's a lot of data, but not a lot of it updates very regularly. As I say, it's like the important folder and the Kubernetes PVs that are kind of the bigger deal. So they could live in my emergency offsite, and then my less emergency offsite is just kind of fairly static data.
For a while, I even got paranoid, and you can see I did a lot of toying around with backups over time. But for a while, I even had it scheduled so that I separated out the sets and the incrementals from the last backup that I had swapped into the drawer were being offsite backupped. So effectively what you had was the latest full set was sitting in your desk drawer at work, and the last, 6 days of changes were being backed up on cloud storage, but that wasn't actually very much, and so would fit within the free tiers of a provider. And then when you come back, stick your next hard drive in, effectively resets everything, and then what goes up into the cloud storage goes back to being the incrementals from that last one that's sitting in the desk drawer. I mean, these are all non-enterprise kind of be as cheap as possible kind of options, but, they work sometimes.
That's nice. What tool did you use for that?
Probably a hideous collection of scripts and bits of duplicity, I think, from memory.
Do you feel like we've answered all of your concerns?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll definitely look at using the CNPG provider for the kind of DB app-specific backups, and then I'll probably use one of the tools, the many tools you've mentioned, Aaron, to do something off-site, probably with some S3 compatible tool, probably Backblaze, if I'm being honest, because I've used them before and they were pretty good. I'll look into that send me a hard drive when everything blows up option as well, because that would be kind of a nice thing to be able to rely on. So yeah, I think I'm good to go. I've got some homework to do. Thank you, folks.
Like most of these things, it's really helpful when you start categorizing your data into logical places, because the hardest thing is when you've just got one big set of 10 terabytes or something, and then you've got real problems. It's so much easier if you've put some thought into dividing things up in a sensible way, and you can easily back up just your photos or just your important documents or whatever without all of the Blu-ray rips or whatever having to be in the same bucket.
Yeah, I took some advice from a guy named Joe on Late Night Linux to basically do lots of data set breakdowns to make sure your data is properly segregated. I didn't take lots of advice like encrypting stuff, but I did do that. I'm very glad I did.
Yeah, if you haven't already got your data sets encrypted on ZFS, it is a bit of a pain because you don't have that raw send option that you do if you've already done encryption in advance.
Yeah, I'm always paranoid about performance with encryption on local disks. I don't know why. I should just accept whatever the trade-off is, which is probably very minor.
I mean, you're writing to it over a 1 gig network. It's probably not going to be any different.
That's logical, though. I might need huge IOPS.
Well, I think we should leave Shane to his home lab and his huge IOPS. In the meantime, if you've got any questions or comments, please do send them in to show@hybridcloudshow.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, I've been Aaron.
I've been Gary.
I've been Sean.
And I've been Shane.
See you later.